AITA for calling off my wedding after finding my fiancé's secret sponsorship packet? My name is Natalie. I'm 36 and I live in a small rental duplex outside Asheville, North Carolina, where the pipes clank every time my neighbor runs her washing machine. I work as a pharmacy tech at a hospital, which means I spend most of my shifts on sore feet, counting pills, answering calls, and watching people pretend they're fine while quietly falling apart. I was supposed to marry Mark, a man I'd been with for almost 4 years, and most of the drama in my life used to be whether my rescue cat, Pickle, had knocked another plant off the windowsill. The email came on a Tuesday morning, while I was eating toast over the sink before my 6 a.m. shift. The subject line said, "Final approval needed. Signage, legacy table, sponsor placement." I stared at it with my phone in one hand and my coffee in the other, waiting for my brain to make it normal. It didn't. The email was from Gina, the coordinator at the Apple Barn venue where Mark and I were getting married in 3 weeks. The venue sat about 25 minutes outside Asheville, down a road with gravel shoulders and old apple trees that looked beautiful even when they were bare. I had chosen it because it was warm without being fancy. String lights, wood beams, a stone patio, and enough room for our families without feeling like we were hosting a gala. Sponsor placement did not belong anywhere near it. I opened the attachment and saw a revised floor plan with boxes labeled Delaney Family Legacy Table, Investment Fund Station, and sponsor signage near bar. I actually laughed once because it seemed so clearly wrong. I typed back, "Hey Gina, I think this was meant for another event. We don't have sponsor signage." Then I put my phone down, fed Pickle, and tried not to think about it while driving to the hospital in the gray early morning. By lunch, Gina had replied, "Hi Natalie, sorry for the confusion. This is for your event. Denise sent the updated details last week, and Mark confirmed approval by email. I just need your final sign-off on placement." I read the message 3 times in the break room while a vending machine hummed beside me, and somebody's leftover pasta spun in the microwave. My feet hurt. My badge was pulling my scrub top crooked. A nurse I knew waved at me, and I smiled automatically like I hadn't just watched my wedding turn into a business luncheon. Denise was Mark's mother. She was 64, polished in the way some Southern women are polished, with neat hair, soft cardigans, and sentences that looked like compliments until you looked closer. She had run Delaney's, the family's Italian-American restaurant, ever since Mark's father passed. Delaney's had once been the kind of place people went after church or before high school dances, with red sauce, framed newspaper clippings, and a hostess stand that had seen better days. When I first met Denise, I thought she was generous. She brought soup when I had the flu. She remembered that I didn't like coconut. She called me sweetheart, which I didn't mind until I realized she used it most often right before ignoring something I'd said. Mark always told me, "That's just Mom. She means well." And for a long time I accepted that. I wanted to. My own mom had died 2 years earlier after a long illness that left the house too quiet and me too tired to know what to do with grief. She hadn't left me a fortune, but she had left me enough to breathe a little easier. A modest inheritance in a separate savings account that I guarded like it was more than money. It was every double shift she worked, every coupon she clipped, every time she told me, "You don't have to spend just because somebody asks." I didn't talk about that account much. Mark knew it existed. He knew I planned to keep it separate at least until after the wedding, maybe use some of it someday for a down payment. He had never pushed, not directly. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. The wedding was supposed to be simple. I didn't need ice sculptures or a 10-piece band. I wanted decent food, my cousin Tessa beside me, a dress I could sit down in, and a room full of people who meant it when they hugged me. Denise started helping because my hospital schedule was brutal. First it was small things. "I can pick up the ribbon samples," she said. "I know the florist's sister. Let me ask about centerpieces." "Sweetheart, you work hospital hours. Let somebody love you for once." Sounded kind. Sounded like support. So when she changed the napkin color from sage to ivory, I let it go. When she added 3 extra tables for family friends, I sighed and adjusted the seating chart. When she told the caterer to include Delaney's marinara as a family tradition, I told myself it mattered to Mark. The family group text was the worst part. Denise named it, Almost Delaney, and filled it with heart emojis, prayer hands, and little updates I hadn't approved. Denise. Added a few meaningful touches today. Family legacy matters. Red heart. Mark's Aunt Carol. So beautiful. Denise. Natalie is so easygoing. We are blessed. I remember looking at that message while standing in the pharmacy stockroom and feeling embarrassed by my own irritation. Easygoing was supposed to be a compliment. I had spent years trying to be low maintenance. I didn't want to be the bride people whispered about. So I said nothing. Until the email. That night, I drove to Mark's apartment after work. He lived above a hardware store in West Asheville. And usually I liked the creaky stairs and the smell of sawdust from downstairs. That evening, every step felt like a warning. Mark opened the door in sweatpants, holding a wooden spoon. Tomato sauce simmered on the stove. Hey, he said. You look exhausted. I got a weird email from Gina. His face did something small. Not enough for most people to notice, but I noticed. He didn't look confused. He looked like someone who had heard a noise in a room where he'd hidden something. What email? I held up my phone. Sponsor signage. Legacy table. Investment fund station. Gina said your mom sent changes and you approved them. He stirred the sauce, then turned the burner down. Okay, that sounds more intense than it is. Does it? My mom gets carried away with wording. Mark. It's not a big deal, he said too quickly. She wanted to do a little display for the restaurant. Old photos, my dad's recipes, that kind of thing. You know how sentimental she gets. Then why does it say sponsor signage? He rubbed the back of his neck. Probably because Gina uses event terms. Venues are weird. And investment fund? He looked toward the stove like the sauce might answer for him. It was just an idea. What idea? A honeymoon fund type thing. But not exactly. Mom thought guests might want to contribute toward our future. Our future is what? He let out a breath. Can we not do this tonight? You just got off a long shift. That was Mark's gift. He could make avoidance sound like concern. I didn't yell. I wanted to, but something in me went quiet instead. I sat at his little kitchen table and watched him plate spaghetti like we were normal. He kissed my forehead when he set the bowl down. Don't let Mom's wording ruin your night, he said. Please don't start a fight 3 weeks before the wedding. That sentence stayed with me. Not, I'll fix it. Not, I didn't approve that. Just, don't start a fight. The next clue came that Sunday at Delaney's. Denise hosted dinner in the private room after the lunch rush. The restaurant was dim even in daylight, with burgundy booths, fake grapevines near the ceiling, and framed pictures of Mark's father shaking hands with local business owners from 20 years ago. The place smelled like garlic, old carpet, and stress. Uncle Ray sat beside me. He was Mark's father's older brother, 68, with a soft belly and kind eyes. He always slipped me extra bread and asked about the hospital like he actually wanted the answer. Halfway through dinner, while Denise was telling everyone about the rehearsal schedule, Ray leaned over and said, I think it's real good what you're doing. I smiled politely. Thank you. I'm mostly just trying to survive the seating chart. No, I mean for Delaney's. He patted my hand. Mark said you two were finally doing something smart with that money. Your mama would be proud of you stepping up. The table went quiet so fast I heard the ice shift in someone's glass. Denise's smile stayed on, but it hardened at the edges. Ray, she said gently, not everything needs to be discussed over dinner. He blinked. I didn't mean anything by it. Mark stared at his plate. I felt heat crawl up my neck. What money? Nobody answered. I looked at Mark. What money? He gave me the smallest shake of his head. Later. But later was exactly how people like Mark got away with things. Later meant I would be tired. Later meant he could soften it. Later meant I would be alone with him instead of surrounded by witnesses. Still, I didn't push at the table. Not because I was calm, but because I was learning. The room had told me something. Ray had told me more by accident than Mark had told me on purpose. On the drive home, Mark called 3 times. I let it ring. Then Denise called. Then Mark texted. Mark, please don't spiral. Mark, Uncle Ray misunderstood. Mark, I love you. Don't let this become something ugly. I pulled into my driveway behind the duplex and sat with the engine off. Through the thin wall, I could hear my neighbor's TV. Pickle appeared in the window, one paw on the sill, looking offended that dinner was late. I called Tessa. She answered on the second ring. Tell me who I'm mad at. Tessa was 34, my younger cousin, my maid of honor, and the person most likely to say the thing everyone else was politely stepping around. She lived in Raleigh but had been driving in almost every weekend to help me fold programs and make decisions I had stopped caring about. I told her everything. The email, Mark's face, Ray's comment, the silence at dinner. When I finished, she said, Nat, normal families don't accidentally create pledge cards. I don't know that there are pledge cards. There are absolutely pledge cards. Tessa, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to get you to stop treating a fire alarm like background music. I sat on my couch in my work scrubs while Pickle climbed onto the armrest and chewed the corner of an RSVP envelope. What do? I asked. Forward me every vendor email you have. Tonight. And call Gina tomorrow. Not text. Call. So I did. Gina answered the next morning, sounding busy but pleasant. I could hear papers moving on her desk. I'm sorry to bother you, I said. I need to understand these revisions. Denise doesn't have authority to change our event without me, right? There was a pause. Well, Gina said carefully, we were told she was helping coordinate family elements. By who? Denise initially. Then Mark confirmed. My stomach dropped. Confirmed how? Email. He replied to the revised layout and timeline. Can you send me that? Another pause, longer this time. Natalie, I want to be careful here. I'm the bride. My name is on the contract. Yes, it is. And Mark's. I can send you the current file and the approval chain. Please do. Her voice softened. I'm sorry, Natalie. We were told this was a surprise you were aware of. After we hung up, I stood in my tiny kitchen with my phone pressed to my chest. The pipes clanked behind the wall as my neighbor started laundry. Pickle jumped onto the counter, sniffed my cold coffee and sneezed. The documents arrived at 10:14 a.m. There was the revised floor plan. There was the updated reception timeline. There were notes about a brief legacy presentation after first dance. There was a vendor invoice for printed cards. And there was Mark's email. Looks good. Mom will handle the wording. Natalie doesn't need to be looped in yet. It's meant to be a surprise. I sat down so quickly the chair scraped the floor. Tessa called during her lunch break. Tell me. I read it to her. For once she didn't immediately snap. She was quiet for a second and that scared me more. Okay, she said. Now we stop guessing. That afternoon, another attachment landed in my inbox from the printer. It was labeled Wedding Program Draft _Final 2. I opened it with my hands already cold. The front looked normal. Natalie and Mark. The date. The venue. A simple line drawing of apple branches. Inside, after the first dance between cake cutting and open dancing, was a line that made the whole room tilt even though I was alone. Delaney Family Legacy Announcement. Natalie and Mark begin their first chapter as partners in life and in Delaney's. Under that was a note to guests. In lieu of traditional gifts, guests are invited to support the newlyweds' investment in the Delaney family legacy. I whispered, partners in Delaney's? I don't even have a key to that building. There were pledge cards too. Not printed yet but designed. Cream cardstock, pretty font, little olive branches in the corners. They asked guests to write their names and contribution amount. The money was to go through a payment account Denise controlled, until business restructuring is complete. Business restructuring. I remembered every little thing I had brushed off. Denise asking whether my mom's estate had settled cleanly. Mark wondering what interest rate my savings account had. Denise saying, a woman honors her mother by building something lasting. Mark telling me his family was under pressure, but refusing to explain. The extra guests. The restaurant sauce on the menu. The legacy table. The family tradition speeches. It had not been one strange email. It had been Annette. That evening I drove to Marianne's house. Marianne was my mother's best friend, 61. A retired paralegal with silver hair she wore in a clip in the Comus kitchen in North Carolina. After Mom died, Marianne became the person who remembered dates I didn't want to remember, and showed up with soup without asking me to perform grief for her. She had promised my mother she would look out for me, And unlike Denise, she never used that promise as a leash. I spread the papers across her kitchen table while she made tea. She read everything without interrupting. That alone made me cry, though I tried to hide it by staring at a rooster-shaped salt shaker. Finally, she took off her glasses. Have you signed anything related to the restaurant? No. Have you agreed in writing to invest? No. Have you discussed an amount? No. Mark knows I have money from Mom, but I never said I'd put it into Delaney's. Good. She tapped the pledge card with one finger. This is pressure. It may not be illegal by itself, but it is designed to make refusals socially expensive. Public embarrassment is temporary. A bad financial obligation can follow you for years. I swallowed. What if they announce it and I just say no? Then they'll make you look cruel in front of a room full of people who have been prepared to see you as their rescue plan. Her voice stayed gentle. Document everything. Do not sign anything. Do not make a verbal commitment in public. And ask yourself whether you want to marry someone who helped build the trap. I looked down at Mark's email again. Natalie doesn't need to be looped in yet. Like I was an obstacle on a schedule. Marion reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't have to decide tonight. But you do need to stop letting them decide for you. I gave Mark one chance the next day. Not because he deserved it. Because I needed to hear him choose the truth when lying was no longer easy. He came to my duplex after work with grocery store flowers, and the anxious smile of a man hoping a small gesture could cover a large crack. Pickle hissed at him from under the coffee table, which felt rude but not inaccurate. I didn't put the flowers in water. I set the program draft on the table between us. Tell me what this is. Mark glanced at it and closed his eyes. Nat. No. Tell me. He sat on the edge of the couch. It got out of hand. That's not an answer. It started as Mom wanting to include Dad's memory. Then the restaurant situation got worse. How worse? He rubbed both hands over his face. They're behind. There are repairs, vendor bills, taxes, all of it. Mom's been trying to keep it quiet. From me. From everyone. But not enough to keep my name out of the program. He flinched. I pointed at the line about partners in life and in Delaney's. Does your family expect my inheritance? His mouth opened. Closed. That was the answer. Still he tried. Marriage means sharing burdens. Burdens are shared after they're disclosed. I didn't want to overwhelm you. No, you wanted to corner me. That is not fair. I laughed once, flat and tired. Mark, your mother made pledge cards. They were optional. Guests were being told we were investing in the restaurant. It was supposed to be a beautiful moment. A show of support. For who? For us. For the family. For Delaney's. He stood up and paced to the window. Outside, the neighbor's porch light flickered on. My living room smelled faintly like the flowers I hadn't accepted. He said, once people see us united, it'll be easier. Easier for who? He didn't answer. I watched him, and for the first time I saw how much of our relationship had been built around him staying comfortable. He was charming when things were easy. He brought me coffee at work. He remembered my cat's vet appointments. He held my hand in waiting rooms. But when something hard stood between me and his family, he stepped behind them and called it peace. You didn't ask because you knew I might say no, I said. His voice dropped. I thought you'd come around. After everyone was there. I thought you'd understand the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that you were willing to use my mother's money to save your mother's reputation. His face changed then. The softness left. That's not what this is. That is exactly what this is. You know what? He said, sharper than I'd ever heard him. I have been trying to keep everyone together. You have no idea what it's like to watch your family drown. I felt that sentence hit the place where my guilt lived. For a second it almost worked. Then I thought of my mother, sick and tired, still insisting that I keep something for myself. I thought of Denise using the phrase, what your mother would have wanted in that syrupy voice. I thought of Mark's email. Natalie doesn't need to be looped in yet. I picked up the flowers and handed them back to him. I know what drowning looks like, I said. I also know when someone is trying to use me as a life raft without asking. He left angry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just cold. He said, "Don't embarrass my family at the rehearsal dinner," before stepping outside. That settled it. The rehearsal dinner was on Friday at Delaney's, in the private room with the old projector screen and a flat-screen TV they used for birthday slideshows. Denise had insisted on hosting, even though I'd offered to pay for something smaller somewhere else. Now I understood why. She wanted home field advantage. I spent Thursday night with Tessa and Marianne at my kitchen table. We did not make a revenge board or plan a scene. We made copies. We printed emails. We saved PDFs to a flash drive and to my laptop. Tessa tested an HDMI cable she brought from her office. Marianne wrote down a short list of questions for me to ask because she knew I might freeze. "Questions are better than accusations," she said. "They make people answer." Tessa snorted. "They also make liars sweat." I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., Pickle knocked a pot hose plant off the windowsill. Dirt scattered across the floor. I stood there in my pajamas, staring at the mess, and suddenly started laughing so hard I had to sit down. It wasn't funny. None of it was funny. But the plant had been doomed for months, and apparently so had I. Friday evening was warm and cloudy, with that damp mountain air that makes everything smell greener than it is. I wore a navy dress instead of the white one Denise had suggested. Tessa picked me up and Marianne followed in her own car. The whole drive, I felt like I was walking into my own intervention. Delaney's parking lot was nearly full. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with relatives, wedding party members, and family friends who had no idea they were extras in a script I had never approved. Someone had tied ivory ribbon around the chairs in the private room. A small table near the entrance displayed old photos of Mark's father, newspaper clippings, and a framed sign that read, "Delaney Family Legacy." On the table beside it sat a stack of cream-colored cards. The pledge cards had been printed. Tessa saw them at the same time I did. "Oh, absolutely not." I touched her arm. "Not yet." Mark stood near the bar in a blue button-down, looking pale. When he saw Marianne behind me, his eyes narrowed. Denise swept over before he could speak. "There's our bride," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look tired, sweetheart. Big emotions before a wedding are so normal." "I'm sure they are." Her gaze flicked to Tessa, then Marianne. "How nice. You brought support." I did. Something in my voice made her pause. Dinner started with salad and bread. People talked too loudly. Forks clinked. The air conditioner rattled every few minutes like it was also uncomfortable. Mark sat beside me but barely ate. His knee bounced under the table. "You can still not do this," he whispered. I looked at him. "Not do what?" His jaw tightened. "Make it worse." I almost felt sad for him. Almost. Denise stood after the plates were cleared. She held a glass of iced tea instead of wine, because Denise liked to appear composed even when she was lighting a match. "I just want to say a few words," she began. The room quieted. Someone near the back said, "Here we go," fondly. Denise smiled. "Tomorrow is about love, of course. It is about Natalie and Mark beginning their life together. But for our family it is also about legacy. Many of you knew my husband and what Delaney's meant to him. This restaurant was never just a business. It was a table, a home, a promise." People nodded. Mark stared at the tablecloth. Denise continued, voice soft and shining. "Some brides bring flowers into a family. Natalie is bringing faith. She understands sacrifice. She understands that when you marry into a family, you carry its history, its burdens, and its future." A few relatives clapped gently, not fully understanding yet but trained to support the tone. My stomach turned over but my hands were steady. Denise looked directly at me. And I know her dear mother would be proud to see her build something lasting with what she was given. That was it. That was the line. I stood. The room went still in stages. First Tessa. Then Marianne. Then Mark. Then everyone else. "Before this goes further," I said, "I need to clarify what Denise is talking about." Denise's smile faltered. "Natalie, sweetheart, I'm making a toast." "I know." I walked to the TV mounted on the wall. My laptop was already in my tote. Tessa moved with me, quick and calm, and handed me the HDMI cable. The screen flashed blue, then showed my desktop. Mark stood halfway. Nat. I opened the first PDF. The revised wedding program filled the screen. There it was, large enough for the whole room to read. Delaney family legacy announcement. Natalie and Mark begin their first chapter as partners in life and in Delaney's. A murmur moved through the room. I turned back. This was sent to the printer without my approval. Denise set her glass down. This is not the time. It became the time when you printed pledge cards. I opened the second file. The cream pledge card appeared on the TV. Several people turned toward the table near the door. One of Mark's cousins picked up a card, read it, and lowered it slowly. I said, "These cards ask guests to contribute to a newlywed investment fund controlled by Denise until business restructuring is complete. I never agreed to this fund. I never agreed to invest in Delaney's. I never agreed to become a business partner." Denise's voice sharpened but stayed quiet. "You are making this sound ugly. I'm showing what was planned. It was meant to honor you." "No. It was meant to pressure me," Mark said. "Natalie, stop." I clicked to the email chain. Gina's message. Denise's revisions. Mark's reply. "Looks good. Mom will handle the wording. Natalie doesn't need to be looped in yet. It's meant to be a surprise." The room changed. You could feel people choosing where to look. Some looked at Mark. Some looked at Denise. A few looked down, which told me they'd known pieces and hoped the pieces wouldn't become a picture. I faced Mark. My voice shook, but it held. "Did you approve this knowing I had never agreed to invest in Delaney's?" He swallowed. "It wasn't like that." "That's not an answer." Denise stepped in. "He was trying to protect you from stress." I didn't look at her. "Mark, did you approve it?" He looked around the room, as if someone might rescue him from a yes or no question. Finally, he said, "I approved the presentation. And the fund. It was supposed to help us. Did you tell your family I would use my inheritance?" His eyes flashed. "I said we would discuss it." That's not what Uncle Ray heard. Ray, red-faced and miserable, stared at his hands. Mark's voice cracked. "Mom was drowning. The restaurant is in trouble. I thought once you saw everyone supporting us, you would understand." There it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not bad wording. Not a surprise gone sideways. A plan. "There it is," Tessa whispered under her breath. Denise's composure finally slipped. "We welcomed you. We treated you like family." I turned to her. "You treated me like funding. That is cruel." What was cruel was using my mother's memory in a speech designed to get my money. A few people inhaled. Denise looked wounded, but I had seen enough pharmacy patients smile through real pain to recognize performance when it stood in front of me. Pastor Linda, our officiant, had been sitting near the end of the table with her husband. She was a steady woman of 56 who spoke gently but never vaguely. She stood, smoothing her hand over her skirt. "Mark," she said. "Is Natalie's account of this accurate? Was she unaware of this announcement?" Mark looked at Denise first. Pastor Linda noticed. Everyone noticed. He said, "She knew the restaurant mattered." Pastor Linda's face settled into sadness. "That is not the same thing." I took off my ring. It was not dramatic. It did not fly across the room. I simply pulled it from my finger and set it on the table beside my untouched water glass. The small sound it made was louder than I expected. "I'm canceling the wedding," I said. Mark went still. "Natalie." "No." His voice softened instantly, the old Mark returning now that consequences had entered the room. "Can we talk privately?" "We've had years to talk privately. You used private conversations to avoid the truth." Denise whispered. "You would humiliate us like this?" I looked at the pledge cards, the legacy sign, the family photos arranged like props. "You built the room. I just turned on the lights." Pastor Linda stepped toward me. "Natalie, I will not officiate a ceremony under these circumstances." Denise turned on her. "Linda, this is family business. A ceremony can bless a marriage," Pastor Linda said quietly. "It can't disinfect a lie." That was the only sentence that sounded like a speech, and somehow she earned it. The fallout was not clean. It never is. Aunt Carol cried and said this could have been handled privately. One of Mark's cousins asked Denise whether the restaurant was really that far behind. Uncle Ray apologized to me 3 times before Denise told him to stop talking. Mark followed me into the hallway, where the smell of garlic was stronger, and someone had left a tray of clean silverware on a cart. "Please," he said, "don't leave like this." I turned. "How should I leave?" He looked exhausted. "I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to tell me the florist called." This was weeks of planning. I was scared. "I believe you." That seemed to give him hope, so I finished the sentence. "I just don't think your fear gives you the right to use me." His face collapsed then, not because he understood, I think, but because he realized understanding would not save him. Tessa came into the hallway holding my tote. "Ready?" I nodded. Marianne walked out behind her with copies of the documents tucked into a folder. Calm as ever. Denise called my name once from the doorway of the private room, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the parking lot smelled like rain on warm pavement. I got into Tessa's car and finally started shaking. She didn't tell me I was brave. She didn't tell me I'd be fine. She just handed me a napkin from her glove compartment and said, "Your mascara is making choices." I laughed and cried at the same time, which is a very unattractive combination, but she let me have it. The next morning, instead of getting married, I canceled what I could. Gina was professional and kind. Because Denise and Mark had controlled some of the add-ons and late changes, the financial mess landed mostly where it belonged. I lost part of my original deposit, which hurt, but not as much as losing my mother's savings would have. The photographer moved part of the credit to a future family session I didn't know if I'd ever use. The florist said she'd donate some arrangements to a local care facility if I wanted, and I said yes. Pastor Linda called me around noon. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too. For what it's worth, I think you chose truth before ceremony. That matters." I sat on my kitchen floor while Pickle batted at a twist tie. It doesn't feel good. Right things don't always feel good right away. She didn't try to dress it up more than that. I appreciated her for it. Mark texted all day. "Mark, I never meant to hurt you." Mark, "Mom pushed too hard but she was desperate." Mark, "We can fix this if you don't shut me out." Mark, "Please don't throw away 4 years." I didn't answer. Denise left one voicemail that evening. I saved it, not because I wanted to hear it again, but because Marianne told me to keep records until everything was fully untangled. Her voice was soft, wounded, perfect. "Natalie, you could have been part of this family. I hope someday you understand what support looks like. Mark is devastated. We all are. I think your mother would have wanted you to choose love over pride." I listened once. Then I put the phone face down on the counter. What I wanted to say was, I almost was part of this family. That was the problem. Instead, I blocked her number after sending one written message. "Do not contact me again except regarding any remaining wedding vendor matters, and only by email." The story spread, because stories always do when a wedding disappears 3 weeks before it happens. Not everyone believed my version. Some people thought I had embarrassed a struggling widow. Some thought Mark had been weak but not malicious. Some quietly messaged me screenshots of Denise asking relatives to keep the restaurant in prayer and remember who walked away when family needed her. But the important people knew enough. Gina had the approval chain. Pastor Linda had witnessed Mark's admission. Ray had told 2 relatives he felt awful for being used. A few guests who had already seen the pledge card started asking Denise uncomfortable questions. Delaney's did not collapse overnight because real life is not that neat, but the public legacy campaign fell apart. A local vendor who'd been waiting on payment stopped extending credit. Mark's aunt told Tessa that Denise had to meet with an accountant she had been avoiding for months. Mark moved back in with his mother for a while. I heard that from Ray, who sent me one final message. "I am sorry, Natalie. You deserved honesty." I replied, "Thank you, Ray." That was all. The honeymoon cabin in the mountains was non-refundable. It was a little place outside Brevard with a porch, a hot tub we never used, and a view of trees that didn't care about anybody's family legacy. Tessa came with me. She brought boxed wine, fuzzy socks, and a stack of terrible magazines. On what would have been my wedding night, we ate microwave macaroni and cheese out of bowls and watched a home renovation show where a couple argued about tile for 40 minutes. At one point, Tessa looked over and said, Do you miss him? I thought about lying because the truthful answer was inconvenient. Yes, I said. Parts of him. She nodded. That makes sense. I miss who I thought he was. That makes even more sense. I sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders and checked my savings account on my phone. The money was still there. My mother's last practical gift to me had survived a room full of pressure, a printed program, and a man who thought reasonable meant movable. I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly. I felt emptied out, like a house after all the furniture has been carried to the curb. But empty is not the same as ruined. Empty means there is space. When I got home Sunday afternoon, the duplex smelled a little stale, and there was a pile of mail by the door. Pickle yelled at me for leaving him with the neighbor, then immediately knocked a small plant off the windowsill like he had been saving it for my return. Dirt spilled across the floor. I stared at it. Then I laughed. For the first time in months, my life felt small in the best way. No group texts full of heart emojis. No revised timelines I hadn't approved. No one calling control a tradition or pressure a gift. Just my old pipes, my sore feet, my ridiculous cat, and a quiet account my mother had wanted me to protect. I cleaned up the dirt, watered the surviving plants, and made toast for dinner because I could. A few weeks later, I found the original wedding program draft in a folder on my laptop, the one before Denise touched it. Just our names, a simple ceremony order, and a note thanking people for being there. I hovered over it for a second, then moved it into the trash. I kept the evidence folder. Not because I planned to use it, because sometimes clarity deserves a receipt. I still work early shifts. The pipes still clank. Pickle still believes gravity is a personal challenge. Some nights I come home and feel the ache of what I lost, because betrayal does not erase love on command. But I don't confuse quiet with peace anymore. And I don't confuse being low maintenance with being loved. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.